Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so very much for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon with Real Talk Travel with Speak Up and Empower. So glad that you could join us because we definitely have an adventure for you. But just let you know that Speak Up and Empower is an online based community which is centered around people who really have envisioned something better for everyone and have got some wonderful ideas, and they're experts in their field and they're wanting to share something. Well, I'm with Real Talk Travel, and that's what I'm sharing. And we have a special guest again. We're so excited to have Audrey DeMonte with us. Yeah, welcome. And also, Audrey is with Travel with Audrey. The thing is, she specializes in giving you private guided tours and retreats. And she makes the itineraries around you, your personality, and what you want to see, what your likes and dislikes, and what you envision as your travel experience. And Audrey and I working together, we're going to make you have the best travel experience possible. And that's the key about travel, to empower you, to envision you, and to give you that experience, to give you that rejuvenating spirit back or relaxing, but blend with the locals, enjoy the food. And we're so happy that Audrey is joining us today. And Audrey, where's our adventure today?
Well, we're going to Spain today.
That is awesome. Oh, goody. I can't wait to get to Spain. So, Audrey, whenever you're ready, you just take it right away, okay?
Okay, you got it. So, welcome everybody. And I love the picture here with the window and the ocean. So, let's pretend we're arriving in Spain. We're going to get off our airplane and here we are. So I wanted to first start off, of course, with a little bit about Spain's history because it's always important to know the background of a country that you visit. You need to know a little bit about its history in order to understand the country that you're visiting. So, first of all, the Iberian Peninsula has been occupied by many empires over the centuries. The Phoenicians arrived in the 9th century BC, before Christ, followed by the Greeks, the Carthaginians, and the Romans. And the Roman Empire actually has a lasting impact on the Spanish culture. But then later on, the Visigoths arrived and then drove out the Romans. In 711, the Moors came across the Mediterranean Sea from North Africa and pretty much ruled the southern half of Spain for over 700 years. That's why Spain is such an amazing country to visit because it is a fascinating place simply because of its blend of Roman, Muslim, Jewish, and Christian history. And that includes the architecture, the culture, the languages. And so, um, it's a place that we don't consider. It's because it is a little somewhat separated from the rest of Europe. We call it not part of Europe, but of Europe, because it's got the Pyrenees that divide it from France, and then of course the rest of Europe. So Spain actually was isolated also from the rest of Europe for a certain given amount of time, especially during the Franco years, which for some of you would not know about this, but it was a dictatorship. Um, and he actually took over in 1936. Basically, there was a civil war in Spain that lasted until 1939, and that's when General Francisco Franco, actually became the leader, and he was in power until 1975. And so he kept Spain very insulated, very separated from the rest of Europe. But after Franco came out of power, of course, today Spain is back to being a kingdom. And so these are all the different flags that you see here um, on the screen that Spain has actually gone through the different years and different stages. And as you can see, the last flag, which represents Spain, Kingdom of Spain, only came into being in 1981. Spain was also a very big they colonized in the 16th century between Spain and Portugal. They were the first seafarers, and they were the first adventurers to go out and seek out what was out there in the big wide world. The first one's actually out of Europe after the Romans. And it's actually thanks to the king and queen of Spain that a Italian from Liguria, from the city of Genoa, Christopher Columbus, even though he didn't find the United States of America, or the American continent, as we should better call it, he was actually in search of India. But he ran into this continent, and so had it not been for the king and queen of Spain at the time, who knows where we would all be today. So I know a lot of people have issues with our history. And it's unfortunate because our history is what it is. Our history is something that we cannot change. History is something that we need to learn from for a better tomorrow. So we take the bad and we take the good from our history, and we learn from it because it is what shaped the world, and it is what shaped us to be where we are today. So let's pass on from history into the regions of Spain. So just like Italy, in Italy there are 20 regions, and every Italian considers themselves part of that region before they are an Italian. And in Spain, it's exactly the same thing because of the years, the centuries of time that has passed with its history and its influences from other parts of the world. Each region in Spain has its own culture, its own customs, its own language. So, for example, if you look at this map here on the screen, we have Galicia on the top left, and there they speak actually Gallego. They don't speak Spanish. In Asturias, it's a beautiful region. So in Galicia, by the way, is where Santiago de Compostela is, which is the famous ending to the Camino, which usually starts in the Basque country. So we have Cantabria. Asturias, by the way, is a very green part of Spain. That is where you find the Picos de Europa. So it's very mountainous up in this area. Beautiful beaches. The Basque country has its own language, Euskera. Again, very, very different. It's actually an ancient language. They consider it to be one of the oldest languages in the world. And that is also a place, if you are a foodie, it's a must to stop in the Basque country. That's where pinchos come from, the same as what they serve in Barcelona, which is similar to tapas, but they just have a different name for them. Tapas were born in the region of Jerez de la Frontera in Andalusia, in the same area where they make sherry. Then you have Navarro, then La Rioja here in Orange is the famous wine region, but Spain has many different wine regions. So La Rioja is famous for North Americans because it's a popular wine to be purchased and found. But again, La Rioja, yes, has amazing wines, and their wineries are spectacular because they have very interesting architecture. And so it's definitely a place to visit, but it's not the only wine region in Spain. Then we have Castilla and Leon. Then we have Aragon. Catalonia is the region which borders France with the Pyrenees in the middle, so on the Mediterranean. Barcelona is the capital, so a lot of people who do cruises and things like that would know Barcelona. Catalonia also has very much its own culture, and they have their own language, which is Catalan. Then if we come further down, we have Madrid here in the middle, of course, which is where the capital resides, the capital of Spain. And Madrid is an absolutely beautiful city, and there is a lot to see. And this is where you probably most likely would fly in and out of, as it is one of the international airports other than Barcelona. Castilla-La Mancha is another famous wine area. It's also known for the Manchego cheese, which I'm sure some of you would know about. Valencia on the coast is where paella originated. I'm sure most of you know about paella. The Balearic Islands, so Menorca, Mallorca, Ibiza are here on the right. Then we have Murcia, Extremadura here on the left, which borders Portugal. Is also another very beautiful area, like Extremadura, Castilla-La Mancha, Navarre, the Basque Country, Asturias, are regions that I highly recommend because they are beyond the beaten path, so off the beaten path. So if you're looking to discover something different, highly recommend, stopping in those regions and checking them out. Then we have Andalusia in the very south, which is probably the most well-known region of Spain, simply because everything that you identify with comes from Andalusia. So Andalusia is where you will find all that beautiful Moorish architecture, simply because the Moors were the ones that ruled this part of Spain for over 700 years. And it's one of my favorite architectures. I just love the style. Um, this is also where you have flamenco. This is where the bullfighting originated. Um, and for example, typical dishes like gazpacho, it comes from Andalusia, and also very big in seafood. So they eat pretty much anything that the sea will give to them. And Nedja, which is a very small town, which is 60 kilometers east of Malaga, is where I spent over 28 years of my life. That is where we owned property. So Andalusia for me is home. And so the Spanish spoken all over Spain is called Castellano. But if, like I mentioned earlier, other regions have their own languages, and there's also dialects. So those are the regions of Spain, and we want to now pop into a little bit about the Spanish culture. So when we travel and we visit other countries, you're not visiting it to bring your own thoughts or your own way of um, of doing things. You're traveling because you want to experience the country that you're visiting. Um, and so it's only normal that if you've never traveled much outside of your own country, um, that some things that, for example, that you would be accustomed to, like ice in drinks or bottomless cups of coffee or bigger being better, are suddenly no longer true. One of the benefits of travel really is the eye-opening realization that there are logical, civil, and even better alternatives. And a willingness to go local ensures that you really enjoy a full dose of Spanish hospitality. It's the Spanish people are also very open. They're very welcoming. They're very warm. And still to this day, it's a country that is still relatively inexpensive to visit. So some of the fascinating parts of their culture is the bullfighting, and it's not so much. And I'm very much an animal lover and an animal activist. So the first time I was taken to a bullfight when I was a young girl, my grandparents were visiting. So we do the typical thing. People are visiting us, friends and family. So where do we take them? So we took them to a bullfight, and the whole time I had my eyes closed. I just didn't want to see this poor animal suffer. But there is so much more to the bullfighting aspect, and you don't necessarily need to accept it or not accept it. It's just a fact of life that is part of their culture. You do not personally need to go to see one if it's not something you want to see, but maybe visiting a museum where you can see these beautiful, elaborate outfits that they put together for the matadors. It's really quite an art. Then on the left-hand side, we have these, and it's not the Ku Klux Klan. These are, this is a very special time of year in the south of Spain. And I've always absolutely loved spending Christmas time and Easter time in the south of Spain, which is a very religious part of Spain. Um, and they have these beautiful processions that take place during these Christian holidays. And they're just breathtaking because they're very elaborate, and they just bring you right into the reason for Christmas, right into the reason for Easter. Not what we know it of today with the little rabbit and the Easter eggs. And that's not really what Easter is. And Christmas is not really about Santa Claus. So, this is fascinating. And you might be asking why they're wearing hoods. And of course, it depends on if it's daytime or nighttime, what part of the historical part of the Christian holiday is they're making a procession on, they'll have different outfits. So here they're dressed in white. Other ones they'll be dressed in purple. So for example, here I have them top left picture. They're all dressed in purple, right? And they're carrying these very very heavy. Um, Structures that come out of the church, and they only come out on these given days. And so the hood that they wear is actually a penitence hood, and it dates back to the Spanish Inquisition. So in the 15th century, it was decreed that those that were convicted of religious crimes had to wear the conical hood so that everyone knew that they had sinned. So this symbol of imposed penitence from the Inquisition is what was later translated into the Spanish possessions. Um, on the right here, we have a young lady who's dancing the flamenco. And so this is definitely something that you need to experience. It's very soul stirring, and again, an art all in itself. So now, of course, part of the culture is food.
Yummy.
Oh. We all like to go out and go out and eat. So, there is, of course, the famous gazpacho. And so this is the gazpacho that we're having in Granada, actually, here. And I'm drinking the sangria. I can see that on my right there. And then we have the paella, which is coming hot off the oven. And we offer paella cooking classes to our clients. But there's another thing that's very important is that paella, just like pizza in Italy, is not all created equal, just like sangria. So these are things that we share with you. These are all information that we actually share with you while you're on tour with us, because there's so much to learn and so much to know that we don't give it to you all at once. We kind of give it to you in bits and pieces as we proceed along the way. And when we sit down for dinner with you, or when we check a place out, we always explain to you the reasons why, or how to really experience the real culture through its food as well. So at here, the bottom left, this is my husband and I in the town that I grew up in on the seacoast. So very much into seafood. So this is, for example, deep fried calamari, which there's nothing like a deep fresh like a deep fried calamari with fresh calamari and not frozen.
Yeah,
You know,
yummy.
most people think that calamaris are rubbery and they don't have much flavor. Well, then they never really had the fresh, right out of the sea. And then the other thing that my husband is eating, which I absolutely love, is gambas pil pil, which are basically shrimp that are fried in oil with hot peppers. Oh, so delicious.
Oh, the hotter the better for me.
And then here on the right, we have churros con chocolate. So you have the little cup here, which is filled with chocolate and churros that just came right off the oil pan. And I'm enjoying these. And this one was in Sevilla. Then, of course, I was mentioning that there's a lot of wine. There's different wine regions in Spain. So we actually recently had a virtual wine tasting that we offered our clients. And so we talked about sherry on this virtual wine tasting. So I put a picture of that on the top left. Sherry is a very misunderstood drink. It's actually something that all Spaniards drink together with their tapas, as both of these originated in the same region. And sherry is, as you can see here, comes in many different colors, many different flavors, aged different periods, different grape varieties. So it's a whole call on its own.
Okay, well, just asking about the sherries then, Audrey, is the fact that does the colors depend upon the soil consistency for the grapes that where they're yes.
Definitely.
Okay.
For example, sherry comes from a part of Spain that has a very white, I can't think of the word in English right about now. It's a very white soil. So it's a very dry, white soil. So yes, your wines and your sherry, so your grapes and your sherry grapes, so your grapes for your wine, your grapes for your sherry, will always depend on what we call in French the terroir. So what part of the soil they were grown? Were they facing south? Were they facing east, north? How high were they? What's the weather like? Is it a hot is the geography of the area that this grape is growing in hot or cold? All of that affects the flavors of the wine, including sherry.
Right.
Now, Spain is on the top right. Took my clients to a wonderful experience of visiting an olive oil mill. Um, and they actually had a beautiful lunch, which was paired with the local olive oil. Spain is actually the largest producer of olive oil in the world, in the Mediterranean basin. And they produce 44% actually of the world's supply of oil each year.
That's huge for
Yeah,
Spain.
yeah, it's twice as much as Italy, four times as much as Greece. Um, and they have quite a large surface of the land which is dedicated to olive trees, which is quite something to see. And I have a picture of it later on, all in long rows. Then here on the bottom left, of course, we have the famous tapas, which, for example, in Granada, you can actually enjoy a drink or a glass of wine or a glass of sherry with your tapa, and the tapa actually is free. Not everywhere in Spain do they have that, but in Granada especially. But tapas are wonderful, of course, in Andalusia, and Madrid also has a wonderful tapa scene. Here on the bottom right, we have the famous market in Madrid, and we have all these wonderful hams hanging here. Ham is to Spain just like uh, the prosciutto di Parma and prosciutto di San Daniele are to Italy. For Spain, it's jamon iberico and jamon serrano, and you also have the jamon de pelota. And that's a whole story all in itself to tell you how they produce it, what the pigs eat, how long it's aged for. But ham is something that is an absolute must for enjoying your foodie side while you're traveling in Spain. Top left here, I'm with my clients. Something I do while I'm on tour with my clients, I have local expert guides go around with you, but I also walk you personally around cities and towns that I don't, like smaller cities and towns where I don't necessarily need to hire a local expert guide. And I also take you on tapas crawls. So I do that with you in Madrid. I do that with you in Sevilla. It all depends on where we are together. Top right hand corner, this is Madrid. Madrid and Segovia, which is just outside of Madrid, are very well known for their roasted piglets. Down on, and it's delicious. It's I know if you're an animal lover and you don't eat meat, it's maybe not for you, but it's one of their specialties, and that's just the way it is. So, bottom right, sorry, bottom picture is a sherry tasting in Jerez de la Frontera, and here they're also enjoying beautiful tapas. And this is a very unique little place because I always look for very authentic places and always looking for places that are locally owned.
That's awesome.
So, of course, Spain has wonderful artists, especially if you go to Madrid and Malaga and Barcelona. There's some wonderful museums. You know, Salvador Dali, for example, the museum on the top left, which is in Figueres. Antonio Gaudi, of course, you would know Gaudi if you've been to Barcelona. In Madrid, we have what we call the Golden Triangle, with three amazing museums, one of them being El Prado. You have famous artisans and painters like El Greco, Diego Velázquez, Francisco Goya, Pablo Picasso, who painted the famous painting here on the top right, which is called Guernica, which is a representation of the horrible civil war that the Spanish went through. Picture on the top left is El Prado in Madrid. And here, of course, we have a painting of El Greco. And then the bottom right is a famous painting which actually hangs in a small museum in Andalusia, which is where the Moorish king hands over the key to the city of Granada to the Catholic king and queen. That was in the 1400s. These are some of the places. Now we're going to talk about a little bit about the places that you can visit in Spain that should be on your list. I highly advocate a good mix of off the beaten path, lesser known visited places or lesser visited places, but still very well known for their history, together with the must-see sites. So outside of Madrid, the bottom left is of course the famous Royal Palace at Madrid, which we visit together on a walking guided tour. Oops. Top left is the famous city of Avila. Avila actually is a gated town. It's just I don't know, out of this world. It has 80 towers, 9 gates. It's very medieval. It's a
Wow, beautiful.
city. Outside of Madrid, you also have top right-hand corner, you have the beautiful town of Segovia, and this is Alcazar, which is actually, they say, where Disneyland got its idea for the the Sleeping Beauty castle.
Ah, it's awesome.
Bottom right, Segovia, this is a Roman aqueduct. It's one of the best preserved in the world, and you can see how huge this is in comparison to the size of the town. Here on the top left, we have the region of Rioja, as I was mentioning to you before. And here on the right, Marqués de Vital. And on the bottom here, Vio's Winery. These are two wineries that you can visit. As I was talking about, their architecture, just splendid. I mean, it's quite something. Again, Toledo. Toledo is a town which is in Castilla-La Mancha, which you visit as you travel south from Madrid to the region of Andalusia, Consuegra, which is in Castilla-La Mancha also. On the right here, which are the famous windmills of Don Quixote. In San Manza, bottom here, we have the famous Alhambra in Granada, which is a site just in itself. It's an absolute must. I've been to it, I think, in my lifetime over 30 times, and I'm still in awe of the place.
Beautiful.
It is absolutely beautiful because you have that amazing example of Moorish architecture. This Nedja is the town on the top left where I grew up in. So I'm very lucky. I grew up in such a beautiful place. And the caves here on the bottom right are the caves of Nedja. Top right is Gibraltar. Of course, Gibraltar is not Spanish. It was handed over from the Spanish to the British in the 1700s. I don't know if any of you saw one of the James Bond movies where he jumps out with a, yeah. Anyways, this is Gibraltar, but you can definitely, it's an easy visit when you're in the region of Andalusia, with they're famous for their monkeys. Then on the top left, we have the famous Mezquita, the mosque in Cordoba, which is a must. It was always a mosque until the Christians built inside of it a church. So it's a place of worship for two religions. And it's quite something to see, honestly. It's always about the architecture and the history and the religions living side by side, and there's so much history. Then on the far right here, we have the famous Moorish tower of one of the largest cathedrals in the world, which is in Sevilla, which also contains the tomb of Christopher Columbus. Bottom left is one of my favorite pictures. It's one of the things I love about Spain, the big wide open spaces. That they do have, believe it or not, and I love the goat shepherds. I love goat milk. When I grew up, my mom used to make rice milk, which is one of the famous desserts in Spain. They're not known so much for their sweets. They do have a few key desserts. They're not as well known as their French counterparts or Italian counterparts or German counterparts, even or Swiss or Austrian for their desserts. But they do have a couple things that are very good, and one of them is the rice milk, and I love it made with goat's milk, fresh milk.
Cool.
So here's a picture of all these olive trees.
Wow.
So you can drive for hours and hours, just like the American Southwest, where you only see rocks and desert. In Spain, you drive for hours and hours, and you see rows and rows of olive trees as far as your eye can see.
So they must have different varieties of olive trees in Spain as well, right? Okay.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And then bottom here we have the famous Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. Again, northern Spain, fascinating modern architecture. Now, going to Spain, of course, in the south especially, top left are all the famous white villages, which we call pueblos blancos. So Setenil is over here, is a picture of this town over here, but there are so many that you can visit and spend literally days just visiting these quaint little white villages where people still go to the regular rhythm of Spanish life. So in the cities, with modern and with the 21st century and 21st century and modern lifestyles. But when you go into the smaller villages and the smaller towns, this is where you can really truly appreciate the Spanish culture, because they still follow the siesta, time where they close for 3 or 4 hours during the day, and they go home to either socialize with their friends over lunch, or they have a little break in the day and they have a little snooze. Then they go back to work or go back to school. And then in the evening, they don't eat until before about 10 o'clock at night. And then I remember, of course, growing up, I used to love going to the disco, and the discos don't open before midnight.
No,
And then
no,
you
no.
would party and dance until 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. And so the young people still do that, right? In some parts of Spain, especially the south, which is famous also for its beach weather, right? So people go down to the south for the beach in the
That's
summertime.
that's why they need the siestas in
Exactly,
the morning.
exactly, exactly. But the Spanish culture is late in the evening, after, slightly before dinner. I mean, usually late. We would all get ready and all get dressed up, and it's what they call the paseo. And so all like little kids and grown-ups and grandparents, if there's a piazza or a special local place in these small towns, even in some of the larger towns, cities, some you can still see it in some of the cities. They do that there too, of course. But it's that famous going out in the evening and just going for a walk, and it's everybody, everybody, and it's not 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's really late in the evening, and it's part of their culture. It's something that you need to do and experience. Then, of course, going to Spain, a lot of people don't think that you get to see any Roman ruins, but you certainly do. And in my opinion, there's some of the better preserved Roman ruins, as most people, would attest to when they're traveling throughout the Mediterranean basin. You have extremely well preserved Roman ruins from Jordan to Libya to Turkey, and including Spain. So, for example, here in the bottom, which is in that famous region of Extremadura, which I love, which is not visited by mass tourism. This is the site in Merida. Absolutely beautiful. And
That's an amphitheater, is it?
yes, it is.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's quite something.
Yeah.
You won't find this in Italy anymore, right? You won't find this. So there's nothing left in Italy usually. So it's mostly all just left to ruin. And then here on the top right, you have another amphitheater, which is near the town of Ronda, and it's called Asinipo. And also in Ronda, there's some beautiful wines.
Mm.
So this is the end of my presentation.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think I just made it right on the mark. If anybody has any questions, you can bring me back in, and let me know if anybody has any questions, or if you have any questions, Susan.
Okay. Do you want to just go to the next slide? My last.
Of course.
Yep. There. Just so that they have my information there just up for a little bit. So if they have any questions, they certainly can get a hold of me. And then if I can't answer it, then I'll certainly get a hold of Audrey. But the biggest key is to be able to give you that travel experience with the private tours and the retreats. So this is why Audrey, being from there, can speak the language, can really do everything to be able to help you out there. I'm just going to close this out. I'm just going to pull this up. There you go. And then we can see Audrey and how wonderful she is to work with everyone to be able to put these itineraries together to make them special. It's off the beaten path. It's something above and beyond of what you would see with the normal tour, and be able to experience with the locals, with the food, and really get the sense of the culture when you're visiting these little areas. And that's what you want to do, is you want to immerse yourself right in the travel experience. Yeah. And that way, when you come back, you really have that true vibe of that country and the people, and just what they do offer, and come back rejuvenated and feeling wonderful because you went on this retreat, or you got this private tour. And so happy, Audrey, that you were able to join us again and give us a little overview of Spain. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much again for inviting me and allowing me to share my passion for Spain, and hopefully that will get people to kind of consider Spain for their future travels. And
that's right. Absolutely, it's a future. It's like you got to put it on your future travel list, and in fact, it's something you can start planning now, even though we can't travel, right? We can still put it in the planning stages and figure out the itinerary and where we want to go and what we want to experience so that it can really be catered to your likes and dislikes. And that's the biggest key, right, Audrey? Yeah. 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 So thanks again for coming, and everybody just continue to be safe and happy and healthy. That's the biggest key. We want to be able to get out there and explore the world and really get immersed in travel. We know that it's got restrictions in lots of places, but we know that this is only temporary, and you can't stop dreaming and you can't stop planning, you know. Even though you can't go anywhere right now, you can go locally, but so forth. Anyway, we will see you next Tuesday. We are going to have a definite another adventure for you. And so stay tuned for that. Come back again next Tuesday at 4:30 and join me again for another adventure and find out where we're going. But until then, everybody just take care and just keep going. And we will see you next week then. Okay. Bye for now. Bye, Audrey.
How do we go?